one. My friends, we are talking, we're at the end of kind of office hour. We're going to talk a little bit for the next maybe 10, 15 minutes about array methods and what that even means. So yesterday we learned about arrays, right? So I said, let array equal 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? And we talked about how we're declaring a variable called array that we are creating it, meaning it's mutable because we did let, meaning it can change if we wanted to. What does that mean? That means that later on I can say some array equals 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, right? That just is what that means. We can change that value if we wanted to. And so, but here we have some array, right? And we know that we can do a couple things. We can look at the positioning of it. I can see, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. We've done that before, able to do that. But, and this is where the different data types come in to play. When we have different data types, whether it's a string, or it's a number, or it's a Boolean, or it's an array, they have different functionalities associated with them. If you remember yesterday, we talked about how numbers have the ability to do arithmetic. We can do 1 plus 2, we can do 1 times 2, we can do 1 divided by 2, whatever it is. I can't do that with a string, right? So each data type has their own functionality. Really, under the hood, it's just a bunch of functions that are associated with it. Now, what we call those are methods. So you're going to hear the word methods and functions thrown out a lot. And really what that means is they're the same thing. A method is attached to a certain type of a certain sort of property called a class. You don't need to worry about that right now. But when I say method, just hear function, method, those are kind of the same thing. Now, what does that mean? Well, it's different properties that we can mess with. So I just put this in chat. Indian Web Docs is a really wonderful tool for HTML, for CSS, and for JavaScript, for really understanding a little bit more about it. Well, what this does is there's a couple big ones that I want to talk about. When I say methods, it again is some functionality, something that we can do specific to this array. In the same way that I can console.log some array of position 1, and that is specific to arrays. Though I can actually do the same thing with a string. Like I could say console.log end of 3, and it actually treats it 0, 1, 2, 3, and it'll give me L. So string has this ability as well, just a fun fact. But I can do this with some array, right? I can say, cool, I want the 1, so it's going to give me position 1, so it's going to give me 2, right? So if I console like this, it's me 2. Cool. Now, and this is something that you're going to get a lot. What if I want to see how many items are in this array, right? How many things in there? And right now I can look at it and say like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Cool, I see that there's 5 things in there. That's great. But sometimes we don't have, we're not going to have visibility of the array. And secondly, we're going to create code that people can interact with. And we don't need to have somebody, there's not somebody at Facebook that's constantly like checking things within each request, right? That couldn't happen. There's not enough people on this planet that can handle all of those requests. So we need it to be able to do some functionality. And let's say that I wanted to see how far or how many items are in here. Well, there's a property called length that allows me to get the length or how many items are in my array. And the way that I access it, length is a keyword. I look at NVM docs, we can go to length. Actually, it's not in this method, it's right here, it's in the property. But I can say my array name dot length, and it will give me how many items are in that array. Gives me 5. Gives me 5, right? So if I were to add in another one. I'm gonna do this. It's dynamic, right? It changes, now it gives me 6. So dot length is something you're going to use all the time. When you get a little bit more advanced, you're going to use dot length, but dot length is going to be something that will lots of times just kind of tell you how many items are in there and vice versa. We can use that. Like if we think about it, what is the last yep, there we go. If I've got this position 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Based on what we know, length is 6. Right? The position of the last item in my array is 5. So a key secret as you guys are kind of dealing with your code is if I want the last item within an array, what could I do? Sum array dot length is 6 minus 1. So if I run this, well, that gives me 5, but if I wanted to get this actual 6, what could I do? Anybody have any ideas?
You can do the brackets with the index correlated with the value.
Yeah, exactly, right? So I could say sum array. Good job, Dalton. Because remember, this sum array dot length is 6 minus 1. It does the arithmetic, gives me 5. So if I ever want the last item in an array, I just say sum array of sum array dot length minus 1, and that's always going to give me the last item. So here I should get 6. Let me change this just so that way it is kind of more visible and makes a little bit more sense. We get 6,000. So that's a little secret, it's a little trick that you guys, as you guys are coding, especially as you do the algo app, being able to use sum array dot length. This is something that you will see in the algo app. So this is what this is doing. Cool. There are 2 other methods. There's lots of other methods. You can see all of them here that you can do. The 2 that we really need to worry about is pop and push. So what does that mean? If I say sum array dot pop, cool. Let's see what this is. And I want to console log console.log. Sorry, I'm a terrible typer. Sum array. Okay, let's do this. We have sum array. I'm going to console log it. Then I'm going to run this method called pop. And now one thing to note is because this is a method, I have to have this parentheses sign. Any method I do. Dot length is really the only one that you're going to deal with that you can just put dot length because it's a property. The nuance between property and method does not matter. Just know that with dot length, or when you're dealing with length, you don't have to have the parentheses. You don't have to do it like that because it's not a method. Any other one you will do, you will need to have the parentheses, just like this. Cool. So let's take this and run it. Here we see that we get, here's the first one, first console log. I ran dot pop and then it got rid of this 6,000. What pop will do is it gets rid of the last element within an array. Pop gets rid of the last element in the array and it actually returns, the last element. It returns the element that it pops. Not really important, but if I were to console log even this, it would give me the number 6,000. On the other hand, if I wanted to do something like this, let me just the way that I did that without having to type this is I did for Mac, I did command and then you do the question mark. So if you hover over line, command question mark, or I think on Windows, it's control question mark. That's just like a hotkey. So every time I try to do that, I'm trying to tell you guys, if I do something and you're like, how the heck did you do that? Feel free to just interrupt me and be like, hey, how did you do that? On Mac, it's command question mark, which is really the slash, or on Windows, it's control question mark. Cool. Great. On the other hand, let's say I wanted, so pop takes away. So I'm gonna put pop. Dot pop. Takes away the last. I've got another one called dot push. Which adds in an element, which means I need to add in whatever I want to do. So what I can say is some array dot push. I'm going to push 45. And so now if I run this code, we get 6,000. And then I get 1, 2, I don't know why that space is there. It's not, it's just a weird thing about term. No, nothing that I did. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6,000. And then at the end, we have 45. At the end, we have 45. So pop takes away the last element of an array. Push will add in an element to the end of your array. There are lots of other ones that you can do. You can splice, meaning that you can kind of change or replace an element if you wanted to. So here, if I wanted to change and I can insert a splicing is like, let's say I didn't want to do it at the end. I want to do it at the beginning or something like that. I can. So in this case, I am adding in at position 1. So I want to add in February at position 1, but I don't want to get rid of anything. So this injects splicing will basically insert it at position 1 and just move everything over to the right. And if I want to go ahead.
So it's a constant, so how can you change it?
Ooh, good question. I'm not sure why they have it as a constant. Yeah, I'm not sure why they have it as a constant.
So when I was going through the Algo app and it was having us do all those activities, and then coding, it always had, if you're going to be changing something in the array, it'd always be bracketed. That's how it was displaying it in the activities. Is that not the case if you're using the command splice?
So splice, because it's a property, or because it's not a property, sorry, a method, we have this. We haven't talked on functions yet, but after a function, you always have the parenthesis. And that is basically, again, these are functions. And so we're just calling this function, and then you have the parenthesis. So the bracket's just for when we're manipulating an array, or bracket is just for declaring an array. Or if we're calling
Okay.
a specific index within that array. When we're dealing with methods, which are just functions, we just use the parenthesis.
Okay.
Let's see. Good question, Daniel. I'm not sure why they had that there. What I think might happen, and Trey, this is way too this is way too kind of in the weeds. What I think Splice does is I think it creates a copy. So it actually isn't, it's creating a copy of months. And then it injects that in there. And so then you have multiple copies, but I'll look into that.
Well,
That's a great question.
I was gonna say, yeah, I was gonna say the thing is with this is that with it being an array, you can still change, you can modify the properties of it, but you just can't reassign a variable basically. But you can still change the properties within that array.
Sure, but you can't reassign and say months equals 8.
Right, but
Yeah.
it could be a constant. You can, yeah, exactly. You can
Yeah.
still modify the properties within.
Sure. Yeah. That makes sense.
So in other words, you can add but not change anything else? Is that what you're saying? Am I understanding correctly?
So with this, if we had, let's say we had this as const. Right, let's see. All of this is okay, right? I'm changing what's within this. And manipulating this. What you can't do with the const and what's immutable is you can't redeclare it as something else, or can't say some array equals right here. You can't redeclare it as something different. Yeah, a variable cannot be reassigned.
So you could go into each index in that variable and slice or like splice each one.
Mhm.
But you can't just tell it that it's equal to something else.
Yeah,
Okay.
great clarification. Yeah. Yeah, and then just like Trey's saying, that's only for objects, which is if we haven't gotten to objects yet. And then for arrays. But you can't do that with like a string. I don't believe. Okay. So those are the methods, the kind of 3 methods that I wanted to show you that are really important is dot length, dot push, and dot pop. But again, there are more, so if you wanted to kind of look, what's nice too is you can like sort. So you can really quickly, if you wanted it sorted, it will do that. Just know that when you're dealing with sorts, remember how I talked about that it'll take the first number and it'll sort it that way. So here, if we try to sort this array, it's going to do 1 and then it'll do 10,000 and it'll do 21 and then do 30 and then it'll do 4. So it's not like a from least to greatest. It just takes this first number. It says, okay, 1, okay, 1, okay, 2, okay, 3, 4, something like that. So, but there's tons of different ones that you can do. What is going to come in handy a little bit later on is we're going to be able to say like toString. So we can convert things to a string. So if I wanted this array instead just to be a string and then do something with it, I can. If I wanted a number to do a string, I can do that. I can also do it on the other way. I can create something. This is just for arrays specifically, but you're able to change it as well. If we can change if we have a number and we want to change it to string, we're able to do that. We'll talk about that next week. That's much more advanced than what you'll need for the exam. But there's lots of different methods that you can attach and you can do, even if I wanted to have multiple arrays. So if I had 2 arrays and I wanted to concatenate them and add them together, there's a method called concat where I say array.1. So you always say the array that you're wanting to call the method on, dot the method. And then with these, they have the parentheses, and then on some of them, like concat, like push, they require that you add in a value, right? If I want to concatenate, well, what do I want to add to array 1? If I want to push into an array, what do I want to push into them? And so then, but like pop, you're just saying I want to get rid of the last one. That's okay. And so then here you can cat and you say this creates just one big array of A, B, C, D, E, F. So there's lots of different ones you can do. We'll use a couple of them. Now we'll use a lot more when we get to web fundamentals. And you'll kind of you'll get plenty of practice with these as well. But the 2 main ones, or the big one is dot length and then pop and push, because I believe on the algo app, you're going to be required to do those, or all 3 of those. So. Okay. Last thing is Are there any questions on that? And I'll kind of stop this recording and we'll go from there. Any questions on these three methods that we talked about? Cool. Great. I'm gonna stop this recording here.